In Frederick County, people know the names, but not always the stories. This is The Last of the Good Old Boys, hosted by Blaine Young and Billy Shreve. Each episode, we sit down with the movers and shakers of Frederick to talk about the moments, the risks, and the values that shaped who they are today. From the people who helped build Frederick County, this is The Last of the Good Old Boys.
Of the Good Old Boys with Blaine Young and Billy Shreve. And of course, Dana G is there to help us along the way in case you have comments and questions in the chat. We're broadcasting live on North Market Street, Studio 401. You can always stop in and say hello. And as the intro said, we finally got a nice professional intro there, Billy.
I love it.
And we talk to people that have helped shape Frederick County to what it is today. And we'll talk about people who will shape it and what it will be tomorrow. Tonight, we are talking with a very distinguished person. I'm honored and privileged to have my good friend and longtime attorney, Alan Winik, who has practiced law for 50 years and is finally saying, I'm going to enjoy my family, my wife, and the rest of my life as he retires from practicing law in Frederick County. Alan, welcome to the podcast.
A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
So, Alan, man, you have seen Frederick County, haven't you?
I came here in 1977.
And what I like to do on the show is I like to kind of shape it up in terms of tell people a little bit about your backstory, because you went to school in Baltimore City, correct?
I did. I went to Baltimore City College, big high school. It was overwhelmed with about 4,400 students and built for 1,000. We went on shifts. It was a pathetic joke of a high school.
You went on shifts?
We went
How
on
were the
shifts.
broken
I went
down?
2 shifts. We went 8 to 12 and 12 to 4, and I
Okay.
was in the morning shift. So the bad news was the quality of education. The good news was that I had time to get various jobs that taught me a lot of lessons that were very helpful in later life.
So your father was a tailor, is that correct?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather was a tailor.
My father worked in the Joseph A. Bank Manufacturing Company in making clothing.
Was that in downtown Baltimore at the time?
Indeed, it was. It was on downtown Baltimore, and fond memories of my father. They worked half a day on Saturday, and I would ride the bus downtown and meet him, and he would introduce me to such important life-changing skills as eating oysters. A restaurant called Connolly's, right on before Harbor Place existed, where it fell by the name of William Donald Schaefer and his friends hung out. And my dad would take me in there, and that's the first time I ever ate an oyster, and certainly not the last.
Yeah. So we always, a lot of times going forward in life, and you've lived a long life, we talk about segregation, desegregation, integration. What was unique was you went to a high school in Baltimore, and what was the composition of African-American to Caucasian?
I would say it was probably about 25% white when I went there. But, there's something I really want to say about that. If we leave kids alone and let them find their own way, my experience at City was I was playing music. I was a trumpet player, never a particularly good one, but enough to play in some bands. And the simple fact of the matter was that I hung out with musicians, most of whom at City were African American. Mm-hmm. But the way young men divided themselves was by what they were interested in. The jocks hung out with the jocks. The chess club nerds hung out with, there wasn't a lot of, in my experience, a lot of black and white tension at all. And I made some lifelong friends at City and, had some incredible experiences. One of my classmates was a guy named Thomas Lee, who I'm sure is a pastor somewhere. One day came to me and one of my friends, another Jewish kid from Pimlico named Louis Berlin, and said, we're picketing the department stores. This is like in 1965, maybe 64, 65. And we'd like you guys to come, to do that. And I said, well, what's up with this? And he said, well, Black women are not allowed to try on clothes in the department stores, and Black folks can't work there. And I looked at Louie, and Louie looked at me, and that night we were on the picket line. So there were lots of experiences,
Commonalities.
lots of experiences that were very positive, rather than what's often pictured as kind of a cauldron of negativity.
Well, I bring that up because not many people can say that they've had that opportunity or had those experiences, especially in this region. In other words, I think it brings a very unique life forward, which it has done for you and how you view things.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, someone asked me recently what race one of my friends was I grew up with since elementary school, like you're talking about. I'm like, I don't know. I never thought twice about it.
Well, I'll reveal something I've done as a lawyer since I became a member of the bar in 1975. When folks get divorced, there's a form, we often call it the dreaded blue form, and it has demographic information. I've always believed there's a big bin somewhere down at the Department of Health where all these go in and no one ever looks at them further. And there's a block at the end that asks for the race of the people that are getting divorced. And with my client's permission, for 50 years, I've written human.
There you go.
And
I like it.
Never gotten any feedback otherwise. And that's kind of my position on the whole thing.
I love it.
I don't care. I want to know what kind of a person you are, and how you treat other folks. That's all.
So I got the privilege to get to know William Donald Schaefer pretty well. And he was a close personal friend. And I used to love when he would start telling stories. And he was telling a story, and so would former Governor Marvin Mandel, who was a good friend of mine, also through Bruce Bariano. But they used to tell these stories of three political bosses in Baltimore County. It was Jack Pollock, Irv Covens, and Little Willie McAdams. I don't know if you ever...
Little Willie Adams.
Yep.
There are lots of stories.
But they said those three pretty much shaped what kind of went down.
Well, they kind of ran Baltimore City, and there are a lot of stories. And this is, I'll relate a story that my dad told me, and that was that Jack Pollock, it's the perception of power very often. And the word was that if you got a traffic ticket, and this goes back before there were points, right? If you got a traffic ticket, took it to Jack Pollock, he could, quote, fix it, end quote. And my dad said, you know how Mr. Pollock fixed those tickets? I said, no, sir, I don't. He said he paid them.
Wow.
So there you go.
It's a lesson in power politics, isn't
absolutely.
it?
But I mean, those were three powerful people, because I remember William Donald Schaefer had said that when his first entry into politics, he was running for a delegate seat. And how he was picked was Irv Covens kind of picked him out and said, we need a Gentile on the ticket. And he lost, I think it was. And then he ran for city council and eventually became mayor and then governor. So you were somewhat very familiar with Baltimore City politics.
Yeah. I mean, people in my neighborhood were involved in that. And then later on in life, it was my privilege to be a volunteer for Senator Sarbanes. And I had some very important policy positions, as in, Alan, can you pick my kids up at school and drop them off at Little League, thereby help shape the future of America. But, Paul Sarbanes was a guy that, he didn't make a lot of big splashes, except he and a guy named Oxley wrote the Sarbanes-Oxley Act,
right,
which is perhaps the most significant piece of legislation in terms of corporate governance in America. So I was a Democrat guy in Baltimore that was involved in those kind of political things.
So you graduate from high school and you, I assume, head off to college.
Western Maryland College, now McDaniel.
to be a teacher, correct?
That was in the country, wasn't it? Back
It was
then?
in Westminster, which was then, I think we had about 800 students.
Okay.
Wow.
And I started out like every kid from Pimlico, wanting to study medicine. And biology became chemistry, chemistry became mathematics, and Alan became an English major. Very happily. My parents were very unhappy about that, but I had to catch up a lot because my high school education wasn't the best, but I enjoyed what was Western Maryland College. Great small classes, great professors, and I graduated with actually a degree in theater arts and English.
So did you perform?
I was a spear carrier. I was not a good actor, but I got involved in directing.
Nice.
And I enjoyed that a lot, and enjoyed in working in the theater, and that was pretty good. And my first job out of college was that I worked for a newspaper in Ocean City, Maryland. The Beachcomber, which was the Shopper, and
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
the
a great
Eastern
paper.
Shore Times, and I was down there doing that, living in a trailer near the racetrack in Berlin, or as we said then, Berlin, Merlin. And I ran into one of the only good teachers that I had at City, a guy by the name of Joe Brune, who was a legend in Baltimore. And he just passed away a month ago. He was a wonderful, wonderful man and a fabulous guy, a teacher and coach. And he said, hey, he saw me on the boardwalk in Ocean City and said, hey, why don't you come teach English for me at Loyola? And I did. I taught at Loyola Blakefield. I taught English for 2 years. It was just really a great experience. But I recognized that if I wanted to have a family, I probably needed to do something where I could make a little bit of a living. And I kind of had wanted to be a lawyer for a long time. I used to sit in police court in Baltimore, in Northwest Baltimore, on Reisterstown Road, and watch the district court proceedings.
Wow.
And so I was happy. I was lucky enough to get admitted to University of Maryland Law School, and I attended University of Maryland Law School.
So, it's interesting. Last night we had a little gathering, retirement party for Alan at the Mountain City Elks. A lot of folks were there, but Bruce Poole told me a story that I want to say he was walking somewhere. I don't remember exactly when. Maybe it was Annapolis or something. And somehow he struck up a conversation with somebody and was saying that he practiced law Washington County, but he was going to have an office in Frederick. And the guy said, well, if you're ever in Frederick, there's a guy that was he was a teacher of mine that was so impactful on my life. And if you happen to bump into him, his name's Alan Winik.
Yeah.
The irony of is Bruce is, when Alan is retiring and pulling out of his office, the person backfilling the office is Bruce Poole. What's the odds that you would bump into somebody and say, hey, while you're in Frederick, there's this really impactful guy that was my teacher, and look him up. So I don't know if Bruce told you that story or not.
I don't know how impactful I was, but I go way back with Bruce. I don't really remember when I first met him, but I remember that Bruce's dad was an assistant state's attorney in Baltimore. And there was a fellow by the name of William Zansinger that was a high-born white guy from the Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, who hit a black waitress by the name of Hattie Carroll and killed her. And he tried, Bruce's dad prosecuted William Zansinger and convicted him, I believe, of manslaughter. And Mr. Zansinger just got a 6-month sentence. And Bruce actually had the cane that was evidence in that case.
Wow.
And then another fellow by the name of Zimmerman, Robert Allen Zimmerman, you might know his other name, Bob Dylan, who wrote a song, the Battle of Hattie Carroll. And so Bruce and I, that was one of the first contacts that we had. And Bruce and I have been friends for a long time. He's an absolutely incredible lawyer. He and his wife work together, and they're just terrific people.
He served in the delegation as in the House of Delegates, and some people thought that one day he may run for governor, but he was very much he was, I think, chairman of the gaming commission there for a while.
He's now, I believe, chairman of the board of shock trauma down in Baltimore. And Bruce, I really believe Bruce could have been governor and certainly would have had my support, but Bruce picked his family and his community and has served them well. And it's been an honor to know him.
Yeah. What district was he in, or is he in?
Back then, Washington County, I think there's only 2 districts. It's very different with the population. But I'm going way back when Cass Taylor was Speaker of the House.
Yeah, okay. Washington County was really pretty rural.
Yeah. So you go to law school, you get out of law school. So where do you head to practice law, or where do you go to use your law degree?
I ended up working for the mayor and a classmate of mine, a wonderful lawyer by the name of Glenn Grossman, who became bar counsel for many years and should have been a judge, never got the appointment. All of a sudden, Glenn and I were in the city solicitor's office and were charged with representing the Baltimore City Police Department and the Baltimore City Police Commissioner in what was the largest civil rights case pending in the United States in federal court before Judge Kaufman. And we were, somebody said you still had your mother's milk on your lips. I mean, we were right out of law school and we're in this big case. And we tried that case for many months, surviving on Polak Johnny's hot dogs. Our office was only about a block and a half away from the famous block. Yeah. We didn't go there for entertainment. We went there for survival food.
Back then, some people may say it was actually entertainment with Blaze Starr, but that was a different era.
Yeah, well, you know how she used to be, introduced. Here they are, Blaze Starr. Right? But life was different.
So what case was that?
It was Vanguard Justice Society versus Mayor and City Council, and we tried it to a conclusion. And the important thing was that we knew these tests that had been given had already been previously found discriminatory by a court in, I believe, St. Louis. But the issue was purposeful discrimination because that would have resulted in punitive damages and attorney's fees and a lot of other things that would have been very difficult for Baltimore City to handle. And Judge Frank Kaufman, who was a very well-respected, if a little wacky, federal judge, he decided that. And we lost on the test, but we won on purposeful discrimination. And the case went up to the Fourth Circuit and was sustained, and our verdict was sustained. As I believe they saw it cert. I'm not certain of this, but I think they saw it cert to the United States Supreme Court, and the cert was denied, so the decision stood. But it was a lot of work, and I had a new family, and one day was reading the Daily Record, and I saw an ad that said, "Progressive Frederick Law Firm seeks litigator." And I'd been through Frederick, but I'd never been in Frederick. Yep. I just thought that maybe it was time to get out of Baltimore. My uncles, I had 2 wonderful uncles, Samuel Winik and Albert Haar, who came back from the war and started a parking company. And they were involved in a lot of political activities, and they built one of the district court facilities in Baltimore. And my father came back from the war. My father was one of those people that enlisted soon after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and served in the Navy on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific. And when he came back, he didn't do anything fancy. He didn't take advantage of the GI Bill. He just went to work in the factory and took care of his family. But I would constantly be asked, "Well, are you Sam's boy?" My Uncle Sam. I said, "No, I'm Dave's boy. I'm the one that he works in a factory." And I got tired of the Baltimore scene.
Ready to start a new life, or your own life.
Absolutely. I wanted to go where I could start on my own and raise my children in a good environment, which Frederick was, and I believe still is.
So go ahead and tell everybody that law firm that you joined when you came.
I was an associate at a law firm called Weinberg, Michelle and Stern. And Manny and David Weinberg and
Seymour Stern.
Glenn Michelle, who's passed as well. And he was a Navy pilot before he became an attorney, and Seymour Stern. And Larry Finnegan, a lifelong friend and a lawyer with whom I became a partner, was the other associate. And we worked there for, I guess, about a year and a half or so. And then we went out on our own. And in those days, the state's attorney had part-time positions.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked part-time as an assistant state's attorney when Bob Rodenheffer was running the office.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Very long time. That was before Tommy Dorsey.
Yeah.
But I tell you, Danny and Billy, he just mentioned Manny Weinberg.
Yeah.
Do you know the relationship there? Do you know who Manny's brother was? So Manny was the lawyer. Do you realize who his brother was?
No.
Danny?
Nope.
That's Dan Weinberg.
No.
And Dan Weinberg was involved in basically the theater. He was the Weinberg Center owner, proprietor. He also opened what was then, I believe, Alan called the Rockin' Chair out on Route 40. That now is, I think, Eastern Motors.
Was that like a bar, restaurant thing, or theater?
No, it was just a movie theater. The chair would rock.
Oh,
So we used to call it the Rockin' Chair. Now, eventually, it was showing
Before its
$1.99 movies. I know that he was in other ventures, but the flood came. The Weinberg wasn't what it was, and there was a movement afloat to revitalize downtown Frederick, and the agreement was made with the Weinberg family, Dan Weinberg's family, that it has to be a cultural arts center forever. If it's not, it reverts back to the Weinberg Center, or reverts back to the Weinberg family. A lot of people don't know that. So there's actually an agreement that's built in that it has to be a cultural arts performance center, and so many shows are run for so many months. But that had to be an experience to, be in the law firm there, not only with Seymour Stern, but, Manny Weinberg, Dave Weinberg, which was Manny's son. Then you go over to the state's attorney office and work for, as you said, Rodenheffer.
Yeah.
Who was there for a long time before Tommy Dorsey took over. But talk a little bit about the, because you were the first drug czar of
I wasn't
County.
really the czar.
For the state's attorney's office?
My family comes from Ukraine. And when my grandfather got here in 1915, he taught me the prayer for the czar. You know what the prayer for the czar is? May the Lord bless and keep the czar far away from us.
Well, I use that terminology because I don't think people really knew that you were dual sworn at the local level and the federal level because of the drug issues in this city and county, right?
I went to work in the state's attorney's office for Tommy Dorsey, and Tommy wanted to do something about the issues with drugs. We had an ensuing cocaine problem, and we had some gangs from, of all places, Jamaica.
Yep.
And I read a book. I tried to educate myself before I started as the leader of this task force, sort of. Some of whose members you saw last night that showed up. But the book was called The Underground Empire by a guy named Miles, and he had been a DEA guy, and his theory was that, yanking people at 7th and Bents for a gram of cocaine, you could do all week long, and you weren't going to solve the problem. The way to make a dent in it was to go up the ladder and get some what I'll call professional drug dealers. If you've ever seen the television show The Wire, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We didn't have it on that scale here, but with folks from Sergeant David Reichenball, and then he ultimately became a lieutenant of the state police, and Tommy Chase from the city police, and we had some DEA folks, even had some FBI folks. We began to work bigger cases and more intense investigation. And I don't even remember how it happened, but I became a special assistant United States attorney that allowed us to do federal grand juries. And I became more intimately involved with the DEA. We indicted, I think it was the summer of 1987, we indicted 72 people, and I think pretty much everybody pled out. Yeah, it was called Monocacy Madness, and we took down 3 whole organizations. And the law enforcement officers, the men and women that were involved in that, did absolutely meticulous work and were very, very, very helpful, and we pulled it all together to make it happen. And here's the rest of the story. The rest of the story is the next morning you could go to 7th and Benson and buy a gram of cocaine for $100 the same way you could before. And this sort of became a realization with me that we were trying to find a microeconomic solution to a macroeconomic problem. Yeah. Until you follow the money, until you really go after the folk who are at the top, you're not going to change it. And as I left the state's attorney's office in 1990 and went into practice with Rand Weinberg, who became a terrific friend, and he and I practiced together for a number of years. But I've learned, as I became a defense lawyer and practiced as a defense lawyer ever since then, that perhaps some of the money that is allocated to eradicating the importation and distribution of drugs would be better spent on trying to figure out why people in America want to put poison in their body.
Yeah.
And maybe some education and treatment would get us further down the road than
Well, I bring that up because, again, I don't think people realize how big and significant there was a drug problems in the city of Frederick, and especially what I would call street traffic, hand-to-hands. I mean, everything changed when cell phones came out because you didn't have to stand on the corner or use the cell phone. But to the point, without mentioning names, that there were actually planes landing at the airport that were bringing in certain packages. That it was bigger than people knew, is what I'm saying.
Well, one of the reasons for the federal involvement was that allowed a bigger scope and an opportunity to get further into the investigations and get to the people that were really not at the very top, but were higher up than the folks that were selling you a dime bag of weed on the street.
So you were allowed to go after the people who are actually bringing it here versus
we were trying to,
and they can make federal case.
We made some federal cases, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think in the long run that our efforts were significant. I think
I do.
You look at the problem now.
No, I know what I agree with what you're talking about, the premise of why, but I can tell you I lived in the city of Frederick at that point as a high school kid. My father was mayor, and I can tell you it was pretty bad. And I do think that you didn't make a difference because if I remember correctly, Alan, some of the culprits moved and headed over towards like Martinsburg, West Virginia.
That's true.
Hagerstown.
And caused them monumental problems that, and I think Billy mentioned Hagerstown. So, again, I don't know if we solved the problem, but I do think that you may have solved the problem to a degree here in the city of Frederick in terms of quality of life and livability, because
it's the politics of contraband until you can't refuse. It's the nature of the business, brother. It's the smuggler's blues.
Just keeps coming.
So you're now in private practice, and then you've been in private practice ever since, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so if it's okay, and hopefully it is, and if it's not, say no, it's not okay, Blaine. Let's talk about, before I will talk about some cases, let's talk about some judges. In terms of, you gave a speech last night at the end, and it really hit home with me because I've always been on this in terms of being professional, decorum, some of the things that you mentioned that are eroding in some areas. But you mentioned that how, it's conducted in Frederick County, conducted in the courtroom, conducted by attorneys, and conducted by, the judges that serve the bench. And you mentioned some judges' names.
I did.
Wait, can you expound?
Yeah, I sure can. Judge Dwyer, G. Edward Dwyer Jr., another Baltimore boy and a Loyola high school graduate, I might say. He became administrative judge. I don't remember the year, but Judge Dwyer always held the lawyers in front of him to a standard of civility and encouraged folks to act in a professional manner in the courtroom. Somebody that's your adversary in a courtroom doesn't necessarily mean that you have to treat them like an enemy. And so that was sort of the ethos of Frederick County. And after many years, when Judge Dwyer retired, Julie Solt, who I practiced law with when she first got out of law school and who became deputy state's attorney and served for many years, she became the administrative judge, and her position was the same as Judge Dwyer's. And Frederick always became a place where lawyers were collegial, civil, and I think I've tried a case in every county except for maybe Somerset in Maryland in my career. It's been a privilege to do so, but particularly in the big cities in Montgomery County and in Baltimore City, there's an edge to it that we don't have here. This is more of a pleasant place to practice law. And of course, Judge Richard Sandy took over and is now our administrative judge. And he's a fellow he's big on civility, and he's also big on fishing. And a bunch of folks under his tutelage put together a program called Fishing for Civility. And for a number of years, there was a bunch of older lawyers that invited younger lawyers down to Rock Hall to fish, to drink a little bit of beer, and usually to hear Judge Dwyer or some other senior members of the bar talk about what professionalism as an attorney means. And it means, candidly, and to talk about at the street level, it means you can fight me tooth and nail in the courtroom, but don't piss down my leg and tell me it's raining. Act like a gentleman and a lady. And to this day, I just had a case in court of a very contested criminal matter. I won. I've lost just as many as I've won in criminal cases. But as I always have done, when the case was over, I reached out to the prosecutor and shook her hand and said thank you. And I just think that's the way we ought to do it. And the fact that we had judges that held us to that standard, was very important. Our judges, if lawyers start talking directly to one another, crosstalk, instead of, making their objection to the bench and waiting for a ruling, they'll say, stop. Yeah. And very quickly, the level of the stop becomes high enough till you get the point and you come back to acting like we're supposed to act.
So when you first started doing practicing law in Frederick County Defense Attorney, how many judges were there then?
Oh my goodness.
It was just a handful, wasn't
Judge Clapp.
Yep.
Judge Barrick.
Yep.
Then later Judge Wenner. And God bless Claytor Smith, who died of cancer, unfortunately.
How many are there now?
Let's see.
7, 9?
I think 6.
Okay.
And then 3 circuit district court judges who are just as important. I'm a big fan of district court. Really, in the world, not that many folks ever see the inside of a circuit court. But
what's the difference? For people who aren't in that.
The difference is that everybody goes there. Everybody gets a traffic ticket or has a small claim or has a cousin who has a small claim or a traffic ticket, and experiences what district court's like. And our judges, Dino Flores, Judge Schaefer, and a new judge we have. They're dealing with dockets of 30 to 50 people, and the justice that's being dispensed is quick.
Yep.
But even in Frederick, it's different than in other places where I've been. And both the prosecutors and the judges here try to keep it a little more civilized and a little I think better focused than often is done elsewhere. So I think our district courts are really important because that's really the face of justice that most people see. Yeah.
Do you think out of town judges know that when they, or not judges, but attorneys, when they come here, they're like, hey, we got to clean this up? Or
do they say, hey, they do things different in Frederick?
Well, I think there's that. And one of the things that's really changed the practice of law, and I guess some of my colleagues would think for the better, I don't, the whole internet and advertising and, the experience that I've had where a lawyer would walk over to me and say, do you practice here? I said, yeah, I do. Can you tell me about this judge? And I have a client who got a letter from this lawyer immediately after he got arrested for driving while intoxicated that touted this lawyer as an expert in Frederick County defending DUI. And I think those folk, they had a learning experience. You remember Judge Bauer?
Oh, yeah.
Who was on the bench for many years. Judge Bauer.
Saw him last night.
He I hope he's well.
Yep.
Give him my regards if you see him again. He would have these folk that would, they come up with a 50-page brief on why the breathalyzer was not valid or admissible. And, Judge Bauer would say, well, that was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for that. I find your client guilty and I sentence him to a year in the Frederick County Adult Detention Center. You can appeal this case and have a whole new trial in the circuit court.
So 50 years, was there, and this doesn't take away from any of the others, who was kind of your three favorite or three judges that either you respected, your favorite, you enjoyed, the court, whatever it may be, that kind of popped out at you?
There are more than three.
Okay.
But I have to say Ed Dwyer was our leader, kind of. And, I was a little angry in my youth. And Judge Dwyer helped me learn how to deal with that and stay professional all the time in court. And Judge Solt and Judge Sandy. And of course, Judge Sandy and I are good friends.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that Judge Sandy treats me in court like he treats everybody else, and maybe even a little tougher than some other folk. But he always kids me, number one, that I'm living proof that all the dinosaurs are not in Jurassic Park. And one of my friends, Rick Winters, he was there last night, and Rick, of course, gets a dinosaur pin. Larry Finnegan, who is like a brother, and I practice with. Should have been a judge, really. He's a wonderful man and a great lawyer. He gets a dinosaur pin. These experiences, I feel so blessed because I think if I had stayed in Baltimore, I would have had such a more difficult time of it as a lawyer. And I think I'd probably end up being cynical and jaded instead of the fresh-faced young lad that I am here sitting before you tonight.
So one of the things that kind of, in 50 years, when I think about it, really for state's attorneys, Rodenhever, Dorsey, Raleigh, and Charlie Smith. And Scott Raleigh's a judge now.
He is indeed.
But really, that's pretty amazing. That there's four. Was there, as state's attorney, was there one that stood out more than the other? I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but you probably had a relationship with all four because in all your various capacities, It sounded like you worked for Road Heifer for a little while as part-time.
I didn't really know him very much,
Okay.
but of course I worked for Tommy, for 5 years. And Tommy was a wonderful guy, and he was a very bright guy. Candidly, not the best courtroom lawyer on his feet, and he didn't want to raise salaries in the state's attorney's office because he didn't want anybody to run against him. I think Tommy's salary was probably $25,000 or $30,000 a year, and as a result, we didn't develop the way we could have developed. And when Scott ran against him, Scott modernized and brought along the state's attorney's office. And of course, Scott and I worked together on the task force, and Scott was there last night.
Yep.
And people forget that Scott also remained active in the Army Reserve and
Yep.
made it all the way to lieutenant colonel, and was deployed to, I believe, Iraq. And I know he was deployed to Afghanistan, because when he went, he carried, these coins
Yep.
that are proper in the military. And my late wife, Paula, who died of pancreatic cancer in 2023 after a long, courageous fight, had been a Navy nurse. And I gave Scott her coin that he carried in Afghanistan. And when he got back and handed it back to me, that was a damn good day.
Wow.
So I appreciate what Scott did. And then, of course, Charlie's taking it over. And I think Charlie and I probably politically and in terms of outlook probably have some substantial differences. But there are a lot of very good, hardworking people in that office. The Kirsten Brown, who had been deputy, that left, Nancy Ham, who Nancy and Judge Solt were responsible for creating the circuit drug treatment court,
Yep.
which has been an amazing success, and which continues to go on. And now Joyce King was named deputy state's attorney, and I hope that there will come a time when Miss King puts her hat in the ring and runs for state's attorney, because I think she will be very good.
So I tell you bring up Scott Riley. When that turns back the clock, at the time I was a Democrat. I was on the Democrat Central Committee. And a lot of the folks, it was during that era where Frederick County was changing in terms of the politics at the time. And Tommy Dorsey was just seen with his roots. His father, Lou Dorsey, served at the county level, county commissioner, a couple terms. They had a business, Dorsey Meats, I believe it was what it was called. Family business. And I went to, they had a forum, and I'd never been to a debate forum for state's attorneys. It was over at Old Betty's Restaurant on East Street. And there was some case, and I can't remember the exact case, but Tommy Dorsey, everyone was saying this case should have got the death penalty, and it was either, the guy pled and got life in prison, and it was just made a political lightning bolt. And I just never remember going. I remember going to that debate forum, and I can't for the life of me remember that case. But it was just when I went there and watched Scott Riley that night, because I didn't really know who he was, and I'm thinking Tommy Dorsey's shoe in. People love Tommy. Everybody loves Tommy, and they debated. That crowd just erupted multiple times for Scott Riley. I thought, wow. People are going to be surprised on election day, which they were. So that's when he went to the state's attorney, and now he's obviously serving there as a judge. What kind of over 50 years, do any cases really stand out as cases that you look back on and say, wow, I tried that and won, or I was I represented that person in Frederick County?
That's a tough question, but there may be small lawyers, but there really aren't small cases.
Yeah.
And In Main Justice in D.C., on one of the walls, it says something like this: the government wins its case anytime justice is meted out to one of the citizens. And one of the cases that I tried, along with the late Stephen LaRue, who was my partner and who died of cancer very young, was a case involving the golf pro at a city-run golf course that was accused of embezzling some money. And we tried the heck out of that case in front of Judge Dwyer and a jury. And the state had offered a plea and a PBJ with no incarceration and essentially a smack on the wrist. And I felt that case was politically inspired, and I thought it was baloney. And so, with my client's permission, we turned down that offer of PBJ and went to trial.
And won.
Jury was out, I believe it was 37 minutes.
Wow.
And we got a not guilty.
Case.
And then Mr. LaRue and I went down to have a post-verdict discussion at the tasting room. And the only other thing I remember is going home in a taxi cab. But that was a good case. But I tell you what, and I was talking to my wife Patty about this last night. The highlights of my career are things when a former client walks into my office and says, "Hey, here's my 2-year chip from AA."
Yeah.
Wow.
I've turned my life around. And you remember, I'm going to tell a story. I promised myself I wouldn't, but I'm going to.
I want you to. Alan, this is memorialized forever, that your grandkids, great-grandkids
My goodness.
can share and watch forever.
Anyone in the world can see this.
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful to have another career as a famous catcher of red snapper in Jamaica.
Good luck.
Alan's moving to Jamaica, by the way.
Yeah, there was a guy by the name of Ralph Hurley.
Oh, yeah.
Who had a trucking business, right? And Mr. Hurley started bringing back some other things from Florida other than produce, all right? And he had a little bit of an organization, and he was one of the people that we went after in Monocacy Madness. And we indicted Ralph, and I don't remember whether he pled or whether we tried it, but he went away for a good period of time, and I forgot about it, and years later, I was walking down Patrick Street to the courthouse, and I saw somebody yelling, and Ralph was a very big man.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm 5'7". So this big man started calling my name and running at me, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to get squashed right here on the street, and Ralph grabbed me and picked me up and hugged me and said, "Alan, you changed my life." And we proceeded to get a cup of coffee together and had a wonderful conversation. And he talked about, how he had gotten involved with cocaine and what a mistake it was, and how he had turned his life around in prison and was, becoming a productive citizen again.
Yeah.
And I felt like we had a little something to do with that. And so
Knew Ralph well. He had the Hurley Hilton.
He became, instead of a liability for the community, he became an asset.
Yeah.
So, that's not a win that I can say, "Hey, look at this big." No, it's just a small deal involving one person. But it was. I remember that day because he put the fear of the Lord in me coming at me that way. I thought he was mad at me, and it was exactly the opposite. He wasn't angry at all.
So I don't know.
Those are the wins.
Yeah, I don't know, Danny or Billy, if you remember across from the fairgrounds, that's where Ralph had a place. And back then, there were certain people that they couldn't get into an apartment. A hotel's too expensive. Mm-hmm. And they would rent a room, and you'd have a shared area. So he had one of those houses across from the fairgrounds, and they wanted him to fall under then the zoning ordinance, I believe, Alan, for like a hotel. So that he got creative and put a big sign out there and it said the Hurley Hilton.
I remember that.
And that's where it was. That's how he came up with it. It was the Hurley Hilton.
Yeah.
So, Alan, before we wrap up, because we've had a very enjoyable 50 minutes, is there anything else that really stands out in your career that you'd like to share with those that are tuning in to the last of Good Old Boys with Billy and Blaine?
Yeah, one other thing, and that is the indefatigable existence of goodwill among folks in Frederick. I have seen people do things. I remember on the way back to Baltimore one Christmas, a truck went off the road on the other side and caught fire. And dozens of people, and this was pretty much right in Frederick, even though it was on I-70, ran over and helped get this guy out of the truck and disconnected the wires from the battery. And the guy was injured pretty badly. And some guy, I'll never forget this, he took off his brand new leather coat that you could tell was a Christmas present, and he put it on the ground and laid this bleeding man down on that. And that's what we have to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that what
Absolutely.
we're supposed to do? And Frederick's a place where the large majority of folks do that every day of their lives. And it's been a privilege to live here.
All right. Well, I want to personally thank you for everything that you've done for me personally, professionally, business. You've represented me for a long time. And I don't have 2 years, but believe it or not, it's going on 1 year and 10 months that I gave up all alcohol altogether. It's just one of those things that I said, don't want it, don't need it. And well, it is what it is. I mean, it does make a difference in multiple different ways. But Alan, we wish you all the happiness. I hope to see you soon, and I hope you enjoy as Alan is moving to Jamaica.
We'll have to go down there and catch some fish with him.
Hopefully you come back every once in a while and say hi to all your friends, but I know you're going to have a great time, and you really enjoy Jamaica.
I do enjoy Jamaica, and I'll close with this. No worries, man.
All right, for the last of the Good Old Boys, that's Alan Winik. Billy Shreve, Dan G joining us. We'll be back next week on Wednesday at 6 p.m. where we'll be talking with Mayor Winslow Burhans, who's been mayor in Newmarket, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 times. I don't know. And there's a unique relationship that he has with Washington County and Hagerstown with his family. So I'm glad, Keith, that you love the show. We'll keep them coming. It is a little bit different. Billy and Danny coaxed me back into picking up a microphone, but I want to do this something completely different than what you all may experience with what I did on WFMD. I really want to dive into some people's lives like we did with Alan tonight, hear their story, share their story, their experiences, young and old. As Frederick County, as Alan said, there's no better place in the world to raise a family. And there's just something special about Frederick with the hospitality and quality of caring for one another. And with that, I wish everyone a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night.
That's this week's conversation on the last of the Good Old Boys. Join the discussion, drop your questions and comments, and be part of the conversation. Catch us live Wednesdays at 6 p.m. on the Everything Frederick Live YouTube channel, right here from Studio 401.